Recently, Josh Bixler from Flight Test gave us some advice here at Tail Heavy Productions.
Be as authentic as he possibly can. There's something beautiful and broken, and embrace that.
So we decided to run with it.
More exaggerated face, damn it! We need clickbait! 3, 2, 1! That was it for sure.
This week's journey started as a tale of shame. Tail Heavy Productions co-owner, Neb, had been keeping this old girl in his garage for the past year. Seeing as it's frigid outside, we knew the odds of getting glue to dry out there were slim to none. So, Neb put his ego aside and pushed the plane from his garage to his apartment while under the judgmental eye of his neighbors. Now we're set. They say great things come in packages of 2, so we opted for a healthy mix of sticky CA and even stickier foaming Gorilla Glue to secure the motor back on the plane after its past tragedy. Easy. What was the most difficult? Probably loading it into the car. Enough said. Once loaded, Neb committed to a series of RC-induced traffic infractions. Since we're from the world of aviation, we'll keep it simple and disclose that Neb drove IFR to the field. Speed bump by speed bump. Rubber band after rubber band after rubber band, the plane gained life. And shape, or lack thereof. That really was our intent with this project, though, to showcase the beauty in broken and how that translates to the radio-controlled hobby. Contrary to popular belief, your airplane doesn't need to have a perfect center of gravity, a perfectly squared-up wing, or exact manufacturer-recommended motor to fly. Airplanes in general are a lot more forgiving than we give them credit for. Don't let that manual scare you into thinking otherwise. If you squinted your eyes, you might start to see that the FAA is the one with the smoking gun because, they stare you down with those eyes that force you into following manufacturer's spec through legal means. Somehow, this ideology that should have stuck to only full-scale aviation managed to trickle down into the RC community as well. Following a manual to a T for legal reasons is great, right? Sure, but RC airplanes do not have people in them. They also do not need to follow exact manufacturer FAA Part 23 regulations upon exiting the assembly line. We're flying toys, guys. Not the real thing. Experiment. Have fun and push the limits with your plane because ultimately, it's replaceable. Let's move on and test this thing at our local field before we put it through its paces in public.
Alright, so we got everything going the right way. I don't know what that noise was, but that's fine.
This plane's takeoff distance is short. On average, most takeoffs are between 6 inches to 1.5 feet, depending on wind and technique. Since this was the first flight on her in over a year, we took it easy to get, acquainted with the plane again. After the first battery, we decided to try and start getting used to walking the plane. This was done because the park we wanted to do real testing at had a decent hike between flying sites. Carrying this plane is pretty inconvenient. It proved to be a bit difficult walking her, but we eventually got it down. The hardest part was speed walking while holding a leash, a 15-pound camera setup, and trying to dodge an airplane. We found what helped the most was leaving tension on the leash so that the plane was pulling you a bit, which made the plane fly even slower for the shot. We were itching to start seeing the true capability and utility of this plane, so we did what any engineer would do as a first test, trying to land a cargo plane on top of it mid-flight. And no.
Well,
no, that really didn't work out. As you can probably guess, that was it for the test flight day, but our next day was just a few drops of CA and moonset away. Flying in an open field is cool and all, don't get us wrong, but this is a backcountry airplane that deserves to be put through a true flight test in this environment. So, we decided to take it to a nearby park and give it a shot. First up, a routine flight. Just in a tighter location so our pilot Neb could see how a plane this size flies on the edge of its envelope. In hindsight, we would have gone with a larger motor for it. This is because, while the plane is light enough to take off in less than a foot, clearing obstacles once you're up can be a bit of a challenge. It doesn't have the 2-to-1 power to weight that we're used to in a lot of our RC backcountry airplanes. This severely limited the spots we could fly it from. Although this recording is broken up because our cameraman accidentally hit stop recording for some reason, you can see that Neb had to make a 180 to avoid hitting this tree because he wasn't able to climb out above it in time and didn't want to put an airplane that's struggling to climb above water or innocent automobiles. We'll just chalk that up as a success overall. Let's try some better challenges. The dog. The idea behind this was to do both a water-assisted landing of some kind, along with landing this giant airplane on a dock. As expected, there were some squawks. There was a quartering tailwind if you took off towards the lake, which meant this wasn't a safe option.
Okay, we're not ready for flight yet, but cool.
The next best bet was to take off towards the trees, climb in a circle until above lamppost height, and then depart. Neb ultimately opted for this route. First up, the dock landing. Neb started out his approach further out than he thought he needed to because he wanted to have plenty of time to set up for a stable approach. Once nearing the dock, he opted to get the plane on the backside of the power curve so that he could come into land as slow as possible. The less ground roll the plane would have on touchdown, the less likely it is to fall into the lake. This went a lot better than we expected, but the overall risk with dock landings was high enough that we didn't want to try it again. And now, water-assisted landings. This was something Neb has tried and failed at a surprising amount of times. Half of his water-assisted landing attempts weren't even on camera. Anyway, he opted to depart the same way, facing the trees to use the wind to his advantage. Once in the air, he flew the same flight plan. As the plane neared the dock, Neb entered the region of reverse command, aka slow flight. He controlled his descent with power and manipulated his airspeed with pitch until the tail was ready to water ski briefly, and then finally plopped it on terra firma for a landing. We gave this one a couple attempts. On to the next spot, where unfortunately we faced similar difficulties with wind. Since the wind wouldn't make up its mind with where it wanted to come from, he opted to take off from the spot with the most usable runway in the event of an emergency. Once the plane was up, he pointed it towards the empty grassy woods and began to climb up in a teardrop pattern. Then, he sent the plane over the water and began the approach while his spotter kept a lookout for people on or near his runway. Once the path was clear, he brought it in. New spot. We wanted to film a good uphill landing because the last was, well, underwhelming. At this point, the gear was beginning to collapse again, so to make sure we got the shot before the gear gave out, we had our friend Misher launch the plane by hand. When he let go, his hand accidentally snagged the servo extension that ran from the elevator to the receiver. RIP. Neb lost control of his pitch axis and had to land without an elevator.
I literally have no elevator. Oh, really? Yeah. I'm just gonna control it.
Thank goodness Superman Misha was there to swoop in and save the day. This was a good lesson in that it's always good to practice for emergencies related to loss of primary flight controls. We'll make a video on simulating these at some point, as it's excellent practice and could save one of your RC planes in the future when you know what hits the fan. After reconnecting the elevator servo, the one final challenge we wanted to do with this plane was a vertical landing. You'll sometimes see these done with small indoor 3D foamies, but nothing to this scale attempting it. We tried one approach, but Neb got spooked and didn't want to break his baby girl. He opted to just put it into the grass and call it a day. This is something that we want to try still though, so if you're interested in seeing it, leave a comment and let us know. If you've enjoyed the video, we'd love it if you consider hitting thumbs up and maybe even subscribing too. Bounce one on for us, happy landings, and we'll see you next time with a new upload.